My name is Dr. Kimberlee Woods with Mystical Awakenings at mysticalawakeningsinc.com. Today's topic is taming the ego. So what is ego? Ego is when we are concerned about self-preservation. It is the thing that comes up when we are in one of three possible states: fight, flight, or freeze. The whole job of the ego is to protect us. And in many cases where we are in danger, we need ego. But in our world today, there aren't many times and places where we are in that kind of danger. If a bear is chasing you, then you need your ego. But sometimes it feels like we're being chased by a virtual bear, and our responses of fight, flight, or freeze take over. So I want to talk about a way to tame the ego, but first we have to understand a little bit more about the difference between negative ego and positive ego. And I'm going to talk a little bit about negative ego, and I'm going to talk about it with reference to personality versus individuality. So when we're born, we have this perception, we have a personality, and we have that perception based on things that are outside of us. If we are expressing ourselves and someone doesn't like what we're doing, we're crying, we're upset, and someone tells us to stop as a child, then we begin to suppress who we are. We want to express our individuality in the world of being upset, or of laughing, or of playing, or of being rambunctious. And someone says, "Hey, stop doing that," or, "Oh, there she goes again, crying." And so we become somebody different. Don't touch that, and so we don't. Don't do that, and so we don't. We learn to become somebody different because we don't want to be rejected. We want to be a good boy or a good girl. And so what we do is we learn to put on these masks. Masks to be somebody else for somebody else. I don't want mommy to be upset with me, so I become the good boy or the good girl. I want my friends to like me, so I put on a mask. I want my new boyfriend or girlfriend to think I'm great, so I put on a mask. I want my boss to think I'm a good worker, so I put on another mask. And in the lifetime of putting on masks, we begin to put on what we're calling personality. Right? We put personalities on and we lose who we really are. So if I ask you right now, who are you? And you write for a few minutes about that, what kind of answers come up? What you really want to seek for or look for is individuality, is who you are without all the masks that you've put on to try to please other people. So what kind of masks do you have? Who are you really? And how do you get rid of those masks? There is such a thing as positive ego. If there was never any ego, if you had no ego at all, you would have psychosis. You would have no sense of self. Or if you had an overinflated ego, then potentially you may feel like you're the Messiah and here to save the world. But there is such a thing as positive ego, and that ego is influenced by your higher self. It is the part of you that is confident, passionate, creative, filled with joy. That is the part that you want to hold on to. That's part of your individuality. The part of your personality that you've been creating since the time you were a child is more about your negative ego. Now, the negative ego misinterprets things and has reactions. It's the part of you that gets triggered when somebody pushes a button. It looks at a situation and it interprets it based on past experience. Oh, you did that just like my past boyfriend. That must mean, and we put an evaluation, a judgment, or we interpret it as meaning certain things. And we have all kinds of meanings for all kinds of actions. When you do this, it means this. When you act this way, it means that. Negative ego is always going to be in a place of avoiding pain. It's about fear. And it's about fear of things that aren't really dangerous. So remember I said, if you're being chased by a bear, you need your ego. But if you assume that everyone's out to get you, a bear, they're acting like they're going to attack you and that you're in danger, then really what you're doing is you're acting out of fear. And that no longer is positive ego, but it's operating out of negative ego. Any unresolved issues that you're having comes out of negative ego. The reliving of them over and over, the always saying you're sorry, the saying to yourself, I'm not good enough, wanting others to tell you that you're important or valuable or a good friend. All of those are unresolved issues and come from negative ego. Anything where there is potentially a place where you are hurt, maybe where you've been damaged in some way in growing up or from a relationship. Anything like that is going to involve the negative ego. So the negative ego will involve anything where you have an over sense of self. Maybe there's arrogance or a false sense of importance or an under sense of self where there's a low self-esteem and wanting other people to tell you that you're lovable. It can involve anything where there is shame, where you've not forgiven yourself, where you have said to yourself that you need to be punished, or that you're doing something wrong, or that there's something wrong with you, where you blame yourself or another, is all an operation of negative ego. If you're living in any kind of guilt, if you are either a recipient of violence or a perpetrator of violence, it comes from negative ego. If you sabotage a relationship so that you never experience good things, or if you're living in any kind of anger or judgment of yourself or judgment of another, it is all an aspect of negative ego. So how do you get rid of this negative ego? Well, it's like an iceberg. And what you see on the tip is your mask until you begin to get rid of these masks, until you begin to say to yourself, I can show the world who I really am. That means that you have to begin to love who you really are. There are no mistakes, only lessons. Whatever you think you've done wrong or whatever you think is wrong with you, if you look at it as a perception, you've only perceived yourself as wrong. And it's simply a learning environment, a lesson, something for you to look at for yourself, not for anybody else, and something for you to gain wisdom from, that you've spent many, many, many lifetimes setting up scenarios for you to learn from. And so if you didn't get it after the second time or the third time, it's okay, because you can get it now. To let yourself be able to say, I'm okay, I forgive myself, and I forgive other people. They're on their own journey, their own lessons that they're trying to learn. It doesn't mean you have to continue to be in relationship with people like this, but to be able to say, I love myself, I appreciate myself. You begin to then pull off the mask. I don't have to be something for anyone else. I can love who I am. And if somebody doesn't love me, then it says something about them, not about me. And if there's more for me to look at and grow through and learn from, then I will. And if there isn't someone in front of me who can walk with me in that journey, that's okay, because there's another someone after them who can. So to be able to love yourself, it also means to be able to see in this iceberg of what's above the water, to be able to see what's below the water, what we would call the subconscious. It means temet nosce, know yourself. To thine own self, you are to know. To thine own self, know. Know yourself. So to be able to look beneath the surface and see what is underneath there, to be able to look at the difficult patterns, to look at what has shown itself over and over again. Now, there are things that can help you to get past these patterns. There are many healings that I learned through the Modern Mystery School. Other people can do prayer, meditation, doing rituals like the ritual of yoga, or other rituals that people go into in terms of their meditative practice. All of those things can help you to begin to look at what's underneath the surface at this iceberg, so that you can begin to have your conscious and your subconscious become one. There is no separation. This is when they say that you have come into higher consciousness. Now, the fastest way that I've ever seen or experienced to do this is something called sacred. I've mentioned it in a few other podcasts. I do have a sacred class coming up on the 25th. If you happen to listen to this and it's something you're interested in, definitely email me, mysticalawakeningsinc@gmail.com. Another thing to help you to move past this uh, ego, and to be able to tame the ego and to become one with the subconscious and conscious is Kabbalah, or the Kabbalah. The Modern Mystery School oftentimes has Kabbalah classes all over the United States, actually all over the world. They're usually 10 months long, and they offer them about every year, year and a half. But there's also the Kabbalah Center, and you can do that Kabbalah online. So right now, being in your home, it's a great time to start Kabbalah and begin to bring together this conscious and subconscious self. Another thing that helps with this is learning to take responsibility for your actions. If you're in a place of blame and anger, and if you ever find yourself, and we've all found ourselves here, if they would just stop doing this, I would feel better. You did this, which is why I had to do that. If there's any kind of you and any kind of statement, then there's not enough taking responsibility. So really taking pure responsibility for self, for what has occurred in your life. And I'm going to talk more about this in the next podcast, but taking full responsibility is one of the first steps. That, in loving yourself, is one of the first steps to taming. I say taming like it's that bear, but taming this ego, so that you are living more often in your positive ego of joy, creativity, love, self-expression, and passion. My name is Dr. Kimberlee Woods with Mystical Awakenings. Good night.